Good morning, everybody. I think it is proper that we start. I hope everybody has been able to grab something to eat, drink, and all that needs to happen. Let me I just needed to allow Honorable Galega Mazibuko to, I'll direct you where the function that for your phone there, Honorable Member. It is unparliamentary, put it that way. But let me welcome the FFC to this particular meeting. Thank you, Chairperson, for being here. And certainly the honorable members who are here. I know we've got one member who's joining us slightly late, so they will be here in full force. The purpose of this meeting is convened consistent with the Money Bills Act that enjoins the FFC to be able to consult at least and engage the Appropriations Committee. And so it's within that context that this meeting takes place. It will be that, and then tomorrow we've got an engagement with the PBO. Honorable members, the agenda has been circulated. Let me, in the light of that, just note, as I'd said, so I've got to read this. I'll try and read this handwriting, but some things are incorrect. Honorable Segede will be arriving late, as I'd said, and then I'd raised the fact that the Deputy Minister Esho Saropin will be joining us, but then we'll have to leave early. But I see there are some members from Treasury who have joined us today. So, and he did indicate that they will then work from there. Honorable Moali is also at another committee meeting, so sends their apology for today. Those are the only apologies I have for this particular meeting. Are there any additional ones from any member who wishes to raise an apology? Not, if there are no other apologies, today's meeting, we've only got 2 items on the agenda, a presentation by the FFC, and then we'll look at minutes in due course towards the end of that, of the session. Can I ask, if those are the only items on the agenda, can we move for the adoption of the agenda? Honorable Waitlin and Honorable Bateman will second that. In the light of all of that, let me then say I want to declare with the adopted agenda and the process for today open and welcome everybody and commence this meeting officially. Doc, I'm going to hand over to you, but I also think it's important to note a few things. The first is that obviously this presentation has been circulated to members. And part of what we try and do is not have a read presentation. I think members would have read it, would have at least, we have to get to engagement rather than us rereading the thing. The second is, this presentation equally so was shared in the joint session with the Standing Committee of Finance, which means that this potentially could be the second or the third time members are engaging similar content on the same bill. I highlight that because I think it's important that we don't become just procedural for procedural sake. Otherwise, you can end up playing like Kaiser Chiefs. So let us not be procedural for the sake of it. I think let's get to the nub of the issues and have a proper engagement on some of the issues that are there. I also want to say, the politics behind the budget, notwithstanding the politics behind the budget, the legal framework enjoins us to be able to make recommendations, certainly to the bills that are being presented before us. My expectation for today is that as we are going to capture the report which is going to be debated by Parliament, that the FFC help us make informed recommendations. And I'm perhaps maybe alluding to the last 3 slides, if I'm not mistaken, talk to recommendations on the main bill, the provincial, the municipal. I'm going to press you even more on those issues because I don't want recommendations to be sort of broad and nebulous. We need to be able to demonstrate to Parliament that we've really engaged the bill to its fullest sense. We've consulted, not just, met and had nice sandwiches and got a presentation and then moved on, but really have been able to engage this matter. And then I think I raise the political question because I think there's an opportunity upon which, for us as an Appropriations Committee, some of the issues that have sort of been rubber-stamped in the past can be matters of proper engagement. I treat this particular process as the first half, noting the fact that the second half is the medium-term budget policy statement. And once we get to that point, some of these recommendations can't just be copy-paste for the next without any transition that goes into that. Because at least the MTBPS gives us an opportunity to look at some of the adjustments particularly. And then the last thing, selfishly, I'm going to task the FFC to begin to do some work on the outer year. This does not need to be for this conversation, but it will be a conversation at our next engagement on that outer year, because that third year, in theory, is fictitious, right? It's a year that you can't just say you are going to adjust for inflation over 3 years. There are realities that change in year 3, and Treasury does this work intensely on issues such as whether even childbirths are going to increase or decrease, and if you knew childbirths are decreasing, well, what allocation do you make to welfare as an argument? So these issues then need to be looked at in the outer year so that we can make some significant inputs that look at year 3. So I make those remarks just to say that I think we need to be deliberate and intentional and use this opportunity as proper engagement. Otherwise, it will end up just becoming, a tick box exercise. With those notes, Doc, I hand over to you and welcome. If I can impose upon you you have half an hour or so to present as you go, but I'm sure you can do it in less than that so that we give ourselves enough time for engagement. Thank you very much. Over to you.
No, thank you so much, Chairperson, and good morning to yourself. Good morning to the honorable members. It's a great pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much. I think last time we saw you virtually, so it's good to see you in person. Thank you so much, Chair. Chair, I think you've captured it very well that, we don't want to repeat some of the information that was in the joint sitting. So what we're going to do today is to just zone in on the division of revenue bill and essentially our recommendations, but obviously contextualize those recommendations as to where they come from. And I think for my role as well, just to contextualize the FFC's role in this process and the importance of the FFC in this consultation. Our agenda, as you can see there, is simply to just speak to the division of revenue bill, and then we'll hone in on the recommendations, which I think we can unpack quite a bit. Move on to the next slide. Thanks. The FFC, as you know, is a constitutional institution which is required in terms of law to consult with this committee. Those are the legal prescripts that you can see there where the FFC's recommendations are required in terms of law. Next slide. The FFC's lens, which we use to look at the recommendations, are in the Constitution. So you can see that the national interest is important, and the capacity of the provinces and municipalities to be able to provide their basic services is key in our recommendations as a consideration. And then the next slide, Gianni, thanks so much. This is quite important as well to see how did this bill get to the House in terms of the role of the FFC. So 9 months before, the FFC made recommendations on the submission of the Division of Revenue. Those recommendations were presented to the provincial legislatures, and there's other set of recommendations which would emanate and be reflected in the bill in terms of Section 10, where 14 days before this bill is tabled in the House, the FFC must be given time to interrogate the bill and look at the fiscal implication of what is being presented, and then give a report to the Minister of Finance. And then that report and those recommendations will find expression in the memorandum of the Division of Revenue bill. We maintain as the Commission that this process did not happen in terms of Section 10, so we highlight that as an issue that Parliament will still need to consider. Moving on to the next slide. In terms of where we are today, this committee, before passing the bill, must consult with the FFC. That is why we are here today. Next slide. I want to hand over now to my head of research, just to take us through at a high level on the research process, and then move on to the next slide.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson, and good morning, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members. In terms of the fiscal... Oh, sorry. Thank you very much, Chair. And in terms of the fiscal cycle, as was already presented, but I think what is more important is, if Gianni can go back to the Section 10 of the IGFR Act, just want to highlight one point, one more up, is may I draw your attention specifically to the section on the Section 10, subsection 3, where it says regarding the minister must consult the FFC, and subsection 4, that where it points to the divisional revenue bill is introduced, that the minister must consult the FFC on. Now, I want to ask lay a question: is which bill is this divisional revenue bill? Is it a draft 1 bill, draft 2 bill, maybe bill without numbers, bill without explanations? Or should it be, as I would argue, I submit, that it has to be the final bill that Minister of Finance tables at this at Parliament? The reason why I think this is most crucial is that this is what substantive consultation means, right? If the consultation does not come with the final bill, instead it comes with a skeleton of a draft, even a template, then of course you can't have consultation, substantive consultation on it. Therefore, I submit that for this section to be satisfied and to be compliant, this particularly subsection 3 and 4, the consultation, what it means is that this divisional revenue bill has to be the bill that Minister of Finance brings to Parliament. If I may, then quickly jump further now down to the point, and in answering also Honourable Chair, thank you for the opening. I want to say 3 things that can go to the direct charges. In response, direct response, and not to make this procedural, as you said, Chair, is that 3 things I would like to bring in. One is we present to Honourable Chair and members the direct charges. Why is this important? By the way, direct charges against the National Revenue Fund is not in the Divisional Revenue Bill, but it's related. And I would like to point to the fact that if you cast your eyes down those items which is in the appropriation bill, two things that needs to jump out is first the debt service cost. Debt service cost is an item in the appropriation bill as under direct charges against the revenue fund, but it is totally related to the next item, which is the provincial equitable share. So I want to just use this a slide to highlight to honorable chair members that one cannot consider divisional revenue bill alone, because it's the allocations that is decided in the divisional revenue bill is totally impacted by this direct charges, which is against the National Revenue Fund in deciding the provincial equitable share allocation. And it is impacted directly by the debt service cost and all the items, other items that are in the appropriation bill, not in the divisional revenue bill. So I just want to bring that also into the whole context of the fiscal framework, is that in terms of now, the next point I want to bring in is about the process. There is a risk right now, because not just because of the delay or because of the postponement, but simply because that the divisional revenue bill, as we're presenting on today, actually sets the first note for the provincial budget. But this week, we see all 9 provinces are running with their budgets tablings, right? And those tablings is supposed to be based on this, right, this one, the divisional revenue bill. And so now the question is, how do you table a budget, right, that where the numbers in those provincial budgets should come directly out of this national divisional revenue bill? And it stands a significant risk, and I think it's not dissimilar, apologies, to the challenge that is facing the national and the legislature as this parliament is facing, is that you have a budget, it's a proposed budget, until it's passed, it's unfunded. And unfunded till it's passed means also then these provincial budgets are also unfunded till it's passed. Now, what about, what is our deadline? Our financial year starts 1st of April. And this is the same for national governments. It's also the same for provincial governments. We are in a severe, I would say, don't want to say crisis, but a significant fiscal risk in terms of the lack of certainty in terms of the IGFR for not just the national budget, but also all across 9 provinces. That's the second point I would like to drive in. Third, what is the solution? Honorable Chair, you earlier alluded to that FFC ought to do more work on the outer year estimates. You're absolutely correct, because the first thing and the only thing, point of entry actually, that will try and remedy this situation is to work on the medium-term expenditure framework, the MTEF. And I would submit that not just that we need to work on those medium-term estimates, but those estimates with numbers. And this is something I think the Parliament needs to, and also same for all the 9 provinces, because remember, these budgets are only proposals. It's a proposal from the executive branch. Legislature now will decide whether to pass it with those numbers. And so at some points, this capacity and capability of being able to, from the legislature point of view, to be able to come with the alternative numbers needs to start working and needs to start developing. I submit that is the direction that not just for this Parliament, but also for 9 legislatures needs to also to think about. Let me hand over on this slide to Fabrice, who will take only 5 minutes on this particular slide on the national direct charges. and then moving on to 10 minutes each. I'm actually setting the time limit for provinces and local government. And we shan't forget on what Valega's point and questions raised at the last engagement. Thank you very much, Chair.
Honourable, just before you go, just on a point of order.
Just a point of clarity, Chair, if I might just request the presenter just to highlight the matter again around the debt service cost against the
Direct, as a direct
point I'm
charge.
just trying to make. So I'm just trying to, just accountancy 101.
Can I sustain that point that it will be dealt with in the Q&A session? Because I think that will give fuller explanation on that issue, if I can. Thanks.
Cool. Morning, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members. So just building on from what Chen has said, the two main takeaways that we'd like to have Honourable Members take away from this slide is that, as you'll see, starting from the debt service cost, in 23-24 there was over expenditure of 4.6%. So now what this means is that the upward revision of 2.5% that's being stated for the 25-26 financial year relative to the 2024 baseline may not be adequate, sorry. And then when it comes to the provincial equitable share, as you'll see on the slide, data indicates that there's been over expenditure of 3.1% in the 23-24 financial year. And as such, the minor upward revision that we see for 25-26, which is less than 1%, may also not be sufficient to meet the subnational government spending needs. On the next slide, we just discuss quickly the pension sector and related payments bill. Now, this also has direct implications for those direct charges against the National Revenue Fund. And what this bill aims to do is to facilitate the payment of public sector pensions that predate the current retirement policy framework. So the key things that we'd like to highlight here is that, firstly, it is essential that the responsibilities of the employer, the government, employees' pension fund, and the employees are all clearly defined as policies, processes, and procedures. Secondly, the employer's primary responsibility should remain that of deducting the pension fund contributions from employee salaries and ensuring the timely transfer of these funds to the GEPF. Thirdly, employees should continue to maintain the pension fund contributions until they opt for early retirement. And finally, the GEPF, in collaboration and conjunction with National Treasury, should maintain and manage the pension fund and the fiscus and have clear delineation between what are early withdrawals and what are fiscal savings in order to mitigate the impacts of the National Revenue Fund. Now, in terms of our recommendations around the public sector pension and related payments bill, the Commission would like to firstly express concerns around the rationale behind these provisions that have been made in the 25 appropriation bill, and also call for greater transparency around the obligation, defined roles and responsibilities in relation to this specific bill. So I'll just hand over to my colleagues to go through the next set of slides. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fabrice. Good morning, Honourable Chair and all honourable members and colleagues present. I'll take you through the part that speaks to provinces. Just to mention here that we are aware that provinces have very limited powers to raise their own revenue. So that makes them to be dependent on fiscal transfers. As a result of this dependency, for this budget, for 2025 budget, then the transfers to provinces constitute over 41%. And then again, going to the provincial equitable share, as the table shows, that an allocation for the 2020, 25, 26 financial year was projected to be at 627.4 billion in the budget, 2024 budget, and this has been revised up by 0.9% in the 2025 budget. On constitutional grants, the table also shows that there has been some adjustment that has been made the revision has been revised up by 1.4% for the 2025-26. So for the total adjustment for provinces, that is now where we consider both the provincial equitable share and constitutional grants for 2025-26 financial year. 765 billion, which was projected in the 2024 budget, has been revised up by 1% in the 2025 budget. Next slide. Now, zooming in on the adjustments to the PS by province, it is key to note that some provinces have received less funding in the 2025-26 financial year and the 2026-27 financial year in the 2025 budget. And an example here is, if you look there, you can see the red bars, that there are some provinces that are below. That indicates that there's been reductions in some provinces. For example, here, the provincial equitable share for Northwest has been reduced by 0.3% in 2025-26, and then by 1.9% in 2026-27, while Gauteng is projected to decrease by 0.8% in 2026-27 budget, as shown in the table. So, but it's key to note that the PS generally for all provinces, other provinces, has been increased in both financial years, that is 2025-26 and 2026-27. As you can see that all the bars are above that 0.0%. It is key to note the importance of accuracy and availability of data to determine the PS allocation for provinces. However, of a great concern for the Commission is the use of additional allocation outside the PS formula. That has been done here, and that those allocations are allocated to specific provinces only, and this undermines the certainty of the provincial equitable share formula as an IGFR instrument, and this could lead to intergovernmental fiscal dispute. Next slide, Jan. Concerning the overall conditional grants, there's been some grants where there have been significant adjustments, and these include the National Health Insurance, School Infrastructure Backlog Grant, Education Infrastructure Grant, and Comprehensive Agricultural Support Program, that is CASP. With respect to the NHI, there's been a significant adjustment as a result of increased funding for the budget facility for infrastructure and funding for the district hospital in Limpopo. Then the overall increase within the NHI is 35.8%, while the reduction in the school infrastructure backlog grant is as a result of the historical poor performance of this indirect grant, which would be merged with the education infrastructure grant. Within the agricultural sector, it is important to note that there's been some developments with respect to some grants that have been merged. That is, CASP has been merged with Ilimadizima, and this is in line with what Commission recommended in its 2025-26 submission. One more thing that is key to note here is that through the NHI, a 1.1 billion has been provisionally allocated for the district hospital in Limpopo for the construction of a 224-bed hospital, which will address issues around audiology, physiotherapy, among others. But this funding is important also to note that it is subject to the finalization of socio-economic analysis, a clear demand analysis, and the funding structure of the project. Next slide. Now, here we've taken some 4 of conditional grants, and then with Zoom, we did analysis on those 4, which were significantly adjusted, and then this is the Education Infrastructure Grant and Health Facility Revitalization Grant. And then later on, we'll do CASP, that is for agriculture, and the provincial road maintenance grant. While the education infrastructure grant increased significantly for all provinces, as you can see, the EIG has increased for all provinces, but the most significant increase is with the Western Cape. And this is as a result of funding for the Cape Rapid School Build program funded through the budget facility infrastructure. And the further increase to all other provinces is due to the unallocated component of the grant in 2024 Division of Revenue Bill being allocated to provinces now in the 2025 Division of Revenue Bill. That is why you have those positives there. And the graph also shows that now on the right-hand side, health facility revitalization grant, what we see there is that there's been an increase, a significant increase to all provinces, and mostly with the, yes, all provinces. And that significant increase is as a result, again, of an unallocated fund, unallocated component of the grant that was there in the 2024 budget division of revenue being allocated to provinces in 2025. And also there's been some incentive component that has been built to these grants. That is also key to mention. With respect to the next slide, with respect to the CASP and the provincial road maintenance grant, as shown in the figure, there's been a significant increase in CASP particularly for Northern Cape in both financial years, and at the same time there's a decrease for Northwest for both of those financial years between the 2024 Division of Revenue and 2025 Division of Revenue. While for the provincial roads maintenance grant, is a significant increase in all provinces between the two Division of Revenue bill years for 2025-26. And this increase is due to the conversion of unallocated funds to direct provincial funding based on incentive and performance indicators relating to traffic loads, traffic engineering, and visual condition indicators in 2025 Division of Revenue bill. The NHI, the last slide is already covered. And then now going to the recommendations for provinces. The first recommendation is that the Commission warns against the extensive use of multiple phase-in and additional allocations outside the provincial equitable share formula and adjusting provincial allocations without objective mechanisms or clear justification, as this practice could create fiscal uncertainty in the division of revenue among provinces and could lead to intergovernmental fiscal tensions and disputes. Secondly, the Commission welcomes the incentive components of conditional grants to encourage grant performance. In particular, within this sector, we've seen that there's been these incentives components that have been introduced in education, transport, and health sectors. However, the Commission recommends a greater transparency for the formula determining these allocations from unallocated portion and the progressivity of the incentive component of this grant. Thirdly, there's been some grants that have been merged, as I've indicated that, for example, CASP and the Ilima Litsima have been merged within the agricultural sector. Then here, the Commission is of the view that while the Commission supports the merging of conditional grants, the Commission recommends greater transparency and criteria of the grant framework, process, and procedures of implementation to simplify and amplify the grant impact. And then lastly, recommendation here speaks to the NHI. The Commission continues to await the development and implementation of a single electronic system that includes live health record information as recommended in the submission for Division of Revenue 2021. And this has been reiterated again by the President during the State of the Nation address earlier this year. Let me hand over to Kuzo.
Thanks, Sabelo, and good morning, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members and colleagues. So I'll be taking you through the last section of the presentation, which focuses on the Division of Revenue Bill as it relates to the local government sphere. And as we know it, this sphere plays a crucial role in supporting the delivery of basic services, or the basic services of water, of sanitation, electricity, and waste management. However, the ability of the local government sphere to function effectively really depends on adequate funding and sound financial policies. So the 2025 budget presents some adjustments in local government allocations that warrant some analysis. Hence, this section will examine the overall share allocated to the local government sphere, including changes in the equitable share distribution and shifts in conditional grants. In the 2025 medium-term expenditure framework, the local government's share of the main budget is set to increase slightly, rising from 9.5% in 2025-26 to 9.8% in 26-27, before settling at 9.7% in the outer year. And when we compare the 2025 division of revenue to the 2024 baseline for 2025-26, we see that the Division of Revenue 2025 did not make any changes to the local government equitable share for 2025-26 and 26-27, while conditional grants decreased by 1.5% in 25-26. But overall, the local government transfers for the 2025-26 financial year decreased by 0.5% relative to its baseline in 2024 DOR. Thank you. Next slide. The slide here presents an analysis of the local government equitable share by municipal category, highlighting some percentage variances for the years 2025-26 and 26-27. And what we see here is that although the local government equitable share remains unchanged, we observe some significant internal shifts in the allocation, wherein metropolitan municipalities have experienced reductions of 0.3% in 2025-26 and 2% in 26-27, while Category B and Category C municipalities have received 0.1% and 0.2 increases respectively in 25-26. Thank you. Next slide. So the redistribution or the shifts that we touched on in the previous slide basically benefit provinces such as the Limpopo province and the Eastern Cape, as we see on the graph. But what it also means is that urban areas, including Gauteng and the Western Cape, as we see the two red bars that go beyond the origin line there, will receive less funding in the 2025 budget. But while the redistribution is necessary to promote equity, we must carefully consider how these changes will impact service delivery in our largest cities, where economic growth and population density continue to rise. Next slide, please. This slide here, we look at changes in conditional grants, which really provide targeted funding for specific municipal functions. And what we see here is that the conditional grants have undergone notable changes in the 2025 budget. Overall, and as we mentioned earlier, is that conditional grants have been reduced by 1.5% for the 2025-26 financial year. So the Commission notes that 20% of the program and project preparation support grant funding is split, and this is as opposed to having the conditional grants being matched over time. And this is split into the newly established Neighborhood Development Partnership Grant for non-metropolitan municipalities, while the remaining 80% is transferred to the new Urban Development Financing Grant for metropolitan cities in the 2025 Division of Revenue Bill. Next slide, please. So the key cuts that we observed in the 2025 Division of Revenue Bill regarding conditional grants include a 3.2% reduction in the direct component of the municipal infrastructure grant, which resulted in 245 million being reallocated to the integrated urban development grant, and an additional 225 that is being allocated to the regional bulk infrastructure grant for the Drakenstein local municipality. We notice that there's also a 10.4% reduction in the public transport network grant that amounts to 435 million in 25-26, which will then increase by 425 million in 26-27 to align with the revised implementation plan and cash flow projections for the City of Cape Town's My City program, which aims to connect underserved communities such as Khayelitsha and Michel's Plain to the city center. On the other hand, some grants such as the Urban Development Financing Grant and the Regional Bulk Infrastructure Grant have seen increases of 7.5% and 6.3% respectively. Lastly, we note that the indirect integrated national electrification program grant was reduced by 0.9%, and this is due to a reprioritization of 40 million over the 2025 MTEF period, which is set to complete the national electrification master plan. Honorable Chairperson, let me just pause here and through you just call upon our Chairperson to conclude the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kutso. Honorable members, so these are the areas of emphasis of the Commission in terms of the Division of Revenue Bill, our recommendations on the bill. In terms of the, this one, in terms of the public sector pension and related payments bill, we express concern as a Commission over the rationale behind the provisions made in the 2025 appropriation bill. Our concern on the public sector related pension, post-retirement, medical and other benefits is in terms of statutory and collective agreement obligations. And we call for greater fiscal transparency of their origin, the defined roles and responsibility in handling the pensions, contributions and benefits as outlined in the public sector pension and related payments bill. Next slide. In terms of the division of revenue at provincial level, as has been alluded to, as a Commission, we warn against the extensive use of multiple phase-ins and additional allocation outside the provincial equitable share. This practice creates fiscal uncertainty in the division of revenue among provinces that may lead to intergovernmental fiscal tensions and disputes. Secondly, we, as the Commission, we welcome the incentive components of grants to encourage grant performance, in particular the education, transport, and health sector of provinces. However, as a Commission, we recommend a greater transparency of the formula determining the allocations from unallocated portions and the progressivity of the incentive component. While the Commission supports the merging of conditional grants, provided that greater transparency and criteria of the grant framework, process and procedures of implementation to simplify and amplify the grant should be looked into. The Commission continues to await the development and implementation of a single electronic system that includes live health record information, as was recommended by the Commission in its submission on the Division of Revenue in 2021. This is important for operationalizing the national health insurance, as also was reiterated by the President. With regards to local government, we as a Commission, we appreciate the redistributive properties of the local government equitable share formula, but strongly recommend reviewing and finalizing the new local government white paper, along with the Municipal Fiscal Powers and Functions Act. Secondly, in this regard, the Commission expressed concern over the exceedingly convoluted conditional grants which affect spending under capacity strains of the local government, as well as the grants evolving into perpetual mechanisms that end up resembling unconditional transfers. Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair. And now, let me open questions to honorable members so that we can go. Honorable Wakelin, Honorable Talega Mazibuko, Honorable Member Bateman. Right, let's start with Honorable Wakelin. Noted, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just on my previous comment or request, maybe just again, just a basic explanation of the debt review impact on the budget that you referred to, and to have an understanding of what you're actually telling us. And then, are you also requesting a possible change in process with regards to the DORA in the final bill? So there's a process that's followed, and that is what we've been grappling with in the last few years. Are you suggesting that the process map looks differently, and what is the impact of that? That is the second question. Just on the matter of pension, so just hear me out. I'm trying to just be practical. So last year, November, I raised a very significant matter relating particularly to local government pension funds contributions, and possibly, and we've got some information on some of SOEs, although they have received the contributions, it's not paid over, and a lot of that money has been utilized for operational expenditure to cover their balance sheet so that they can be able to survive. If you're taking those in consideration, is that what you actually are telling us in a nice way? Or are you saying that, so what are you saying? So let us just be clear on what are you saying to us, because my bigger concern is the contributions not being paid over for those that have been working for many years so that they can have a good retirement. And I am very concerned, especially I've got a list. I'm happy to share. There's, I think, over 100 municipalities currently that's way behind with the contributions. I don't know if that's a different matter or is it the same thing that you refer to. You also, an interesting matter, and I think we've been doing that, but I'm not so sure if we're doing it so well, is the matter of the alignment between the EPWP program as a rollout and as a, remember, EPWP program is a stepping stone program for people that's unemployed, to be able to give them a set of skills to be able to become employable so that they can look after themselves. So that is the intention of EPWP, that's always been there. But you are saying, let us find an alignment between EPWP and infrastructure programs. Are you saying to me that you're not doing it well and we should do it better? And if you are saying so, what suggestions do you suggest? How do we, from a structural point of view, deal with this better? As, right down to because it affects all three spheres of government. My other concern is that I don't hear you speak about the portion of contribution to provinces, provincial departments. How many of that relates to salaries as opposed to operational cost? I'm very concerned, and I know, for instance, health, and because it's heavily staff, there's a heavy staff component. I think it's up to 60%, if I'm correct. And these are the things that I'm concerned about. You know, we don't have enough money to do the work, but we've got enough money to pay the salaries. And I know that National Treasury has got a mark, as far right, 32% contribution to employment. So I just want to get your sense on that. And what is your solution to that? And then you say to us that there is a data reliance, there is an updated or change in the provincial contribution because of a data. Which data was used? What data sets were used? Do you know? Because the last I remember we spoke about census 2022 being the data, and we always questioned that many times here. My last comment, Chair, and I said that to you before, we need to marry this with the AG reports, particularly the infrastructure programs. We are going to give money away again, and some money will be rolled over to projects that are not successful, and the AG has reported on that, and we don't have to go look too far where the non-performance are. I think that we need to marry the two very closely this year. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Kalega Mazibuko.
Thank you very much, Chair, and we welcome the presentation. Chair, let me first apologize to the presenter. I would like I'm not sure whether it's slide 16 or it's page 16, the Division of Revenue for Provinces Conditional Grant Adjustment by Province, EIG, HFRG. If the presenter could unpack that a little bit, because I would want to understand the EIG 90% Western Cape and the 14 Northern Cape and all that. If you could just explain it a little bit. Yeah, I know that you galloped when you were presenting because of time on that one. I just need a better understanding. And then my question is also related to Honorable Wakelin's question on the allocation or to provinces. He asked about the provinces on how many of that allocation is related to salaries as opposed to service delivery. I would pose the same question for local government because of the state of local government in terms of service delivery. So we would want to know that comparative that he has asked. Chair, the reduction of the Category A municipalities, for me, is a great concern. I might sound like a scratch record, but I think the assumption here is that those municipalities are able to collect revenue, of which we know for a fact that they are no longer have that capacity now to collect revenue for different reasons. That people who are migrating to the metros for greener pastures, they don't get those greener pastures and they settle at the informal settlements there and they are not working. And even people who used to pay from the townships, they are no longer paying for services because of unemployment and other reasons. So those Category A metros that is why sometimes they look the way they look. If you go to these metros, the situation is very bad. So for me, this decrease, I don't think it has been thought through thoroughly. And then the last comment, Chair, is on the recommendations. Yeah, we accept and hear some of the recommendations, but I think the Commission is mum, especially on the recommendations on conditional grants, is mum on the none or underspending of these conditional grants. We know that sometimes the conditional grants would be returned back because they have not been spent as allocated. So I don't see any recommendation in that regard. So I'm not sure whether maybe it is not that important or I didn't see the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Mkonto.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to you, Chair, honorable members, the chairperson of FSC and her team. Chair, my first question is based on the debt service costs. I want to understand if the FFC is consulted between these before these debts are committed to, and what are their recommendations, or what will be their recommendations, because seemingly these debt service costs are increasing alarmingly. And then I'm checking some provinces have already done their budget speeches. According to what has been presented here, is that procedural, that this bill has not yet been passed and then or submitted to Parliament, and some provinces already have presented their budget speeches? I just want to understand that. My colleagues have already spoken to the fact that the allocations to provinces, is the factor of under expenditure considered? Because it is a well-known fact that opposition parties are fighting in the Free State that this year 50 billion will be taken back to Treasury because of under expenditure. But you look at the allocations in this bill, Free State is having an increment, and some other provinces where there are no complaints are getting negatives. So exactly what is considered before these funds are given to, these grants are given to provinces? Chair, they talked about the incentive component. Can that be extended to local government? Because there are municipalities that are trying their best. We can't run away from that. There are municipalities that are trying their best at all costs. Is it possible that the incentive component can be extended to a local government? Chair, I'm new in this committee, so I would love colleagues to explain to me what is a multi-phase in. They are saying they are discouraging the multiple phase-ins, and I'm lost. To be honest, I don't know what is the what is the meaning of that. Thanks, Chair.
Honourable Bateman.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Thank you to the members of the FFC for your excellent and informative presentation, and good morning also to my honourable colleagues. First question, just picking up on the process. I understand that 14-day consultation period wasn't observed, and it seems to me that DORA can be challenged on constitutional grounds, if I'm not mistaken. Have we taken legal advice on this? Is that the correct position, that it is constitutionally vulnerable? And if so, what steps need to be taken by the National Treasury to rectify the situation this year, if there is a constitutional risk, and what do we need to learn for future years? Maybe if you could just comment on that, question one. Number two, on the public sector pension and related payments bill. So could you clarify which expenses are being charged to the National Revenue Fund directly, and in particular, which of these are being charged directly for the first time, and provide some details of that? And secondly, this is a question I think perhaps for the Treasury, but will the Appropriations Committee be presented with detailed financial reports of what is being charged directly to the National Revenue Fund, together with comparative information for the previous 2 years and also projections for the medium term? I think we need to have that level of detail here, because as far as I know, that's not going to have the scrutiny of a budget vote. And so I think we need to be scrutinizing it ourselves and seeing what charges are going through there. And I still don't understand the rationale for the change, and that's concerning to me. You know, in accounting terms, when you slip something below the line, you know, you always want to know, well, what are you trying to slip below the line here? Why is this not? Why we're not seeing transparently what is being charged and the reasoning behind it? So I think we need to ask Treasury to be very transparent with us and show us all the numbers, past and future, and give us a full rationale behind the bill. Third thing, on DORA for provinces, there was a slide that was put up, and I was a little bit confused by what the percentages meant. So I don't know if I should maybe just find the exact slide quickly so I can refer to it. Yeah, so it had a 2 bars for 25, 26 and 26, 27, and each of the provinces, and a percentage increase. The total on the bottom right corner was 0.9% for 25, 26 and 0.7% for 26, 27. Those are the increases. Now, I was just scratching my head trying to work out what am I actually looking at. I mean, is that the total rand value of the increase? Is that after adjusting for projected inflation? If it's just a rand value of increase, then am I understanding that the National Treasury is proposing to squeeze the provinces with like these very much below inflation increases in terms of their unearmarked funds? And if so, I mean, we're not going to have a revolt from the provinces on our hands. So just some understanding of what those numbers actually represent. And again, I think it also, if that is the case, then I think it does seem to reinforce the point that the FFC is making about the amount of money that's going in conditional grants. And look, maybe there's an explanation for it. I think, you know, if there's certain things that have been taken out of the unconditional monies and that now therefore are being funded through conditional monies, then there could be an explanation for it. But it's just, yeah, just have to have some clarity on that. On the direct charges, the slide direct charges against the National Revenue Fund, can someone advise why the President and Deputy President's salaries ran over budget by 57.5% in 23-24, and also Parliament members' remuneration by 15.1%? I think that does beg the question, rather. And then... Mine's in the mail. Thank you, Honourable Chair. I would remind you of the constitutional oath that you took. Okay, so then third question is, that was just a joke, by the way, lest anybody misunderstand. Although I don't know that necessarily the members of the public would find it that funny, but anyway. Okay. There is a concern that I'm hearing on that slide again, direct charges against the NRF, that the Treasury is not being sufficiently prudent with regard to the debt service cost estimate. And that's a big number, and it's obviously important. And also the cost of the provinces based on the previous estimates being insufficient. And it seems like you're comparing the overrun and saying, based on past experience, if I'm understanding it, we have a concern about Treasury's forecasting of these numbers. Obviously, in the whole idea with the 14 days is that you should have a chance to interrogate those numbers and reach your own conclusions based on an audit, if you like, of the work that they've done in reaching their forecasts. So not having had the opportunity to have those 14 days to really interrogate the numbers properly, if I'm understanding correctly, is what's causing this sense of nervousness and uncertainty around the numbers. Because I mean, it's obviously, it's concerning that it was over, they went over in the previous year, but we don't know what the assumptions were that they've used in the current year. And so I think it's fair to say that we call on the Treasury to open up the books here and allow the FFC to understand fully and report back and reach an independent view on these material numbers and be able to advise us properly. And that's why the process is there, that's why the body is there. And I think we need to object strenuously to the fact that the FFC is not being given the chance to do their job as they ought to be allowed to do, because that weakens how this whole process is supposed to work and undermines our constitution. So my question is just, have you had the opportunity to interrogate the current year's numbers with National Treasury and to ensure that they are sufficient, or to be able to express an adverse opinion based on your assessments? And then you've also previously raised concerns, I know it's not in today's presentation, but if I'm not mistaken, about the growth forecasts and the tax revenue forecasts of Treasury. And I think the same comments would apply, that you need to be given the opportunity to really assess that and reach a view on it and to guide us. And I think, you know, sometimes things get lost in the noise here, but affirm or deny and provide reasoning. But what I'm hearing is FFC is sending flashing orange warning lights at National Treasury, at Parliament, and at the South African public, saying our budget is not sufficiently conservative and prudent. Be concerned about the way in which this budget has been put together. And I think that there's a very good chance that we'll find ourselves in a worse position by this time next year if we don't act now. That's what I'm interpreting from the numbers. But I'd like the FFC to speak to that. And I hope... you also expressed the concern about the risk of disputes because of an over-reliance on conditional grants and how that can undermine the equitable share allocations between provinces. And so if the provinces are feeling that it's unfair, and And I'm understanding, just stepping back, that presumably Treasury is concerned that provinces are misspending the money that's allocated to them. And so they're trying to put conditions around the money. There would be a way of getting around this to some degree if they were to step back and provide an overall picture, taking local government, provincial government, everything into account. But I mean, I think that there is a concern there, and I've got two questions around this. Have there been such disputes, or are there any disputes like that which are brewing that you're aware of? And secondly, can you suggest a way that we could devise a method so that we could protect against both risks? One, the risk of unfairness, but two, the risk of misspending. Typically, capital expenditure monies that should be spent on upgrading facilities or roads or projects or what have you, that's now being spent on salaries. That's typically what happens because it's just too difficult to make tough decisions and spend the money the way it's supposed to be. So I can understand why there's pressure from National Treasury to attach the conditions if there's the perception that provinces are not spending their funds as they should. So, but if you can guide us with a way to navigate and manage both those risks, I think that would be helpful. And maybe that's a longer term project. I don't know if you're able to answer it here and now, but sorry, almost there, two more. The FFC is interested in the national interest and also the provinces and the municipalities' ability to deliver services. That's part of the FFC's mandate. Now, at the national level, we're extremely concerned about debt levels and the concerns about over-optimistic forecasts of revenue. At the provincial and at the local, and also about economic growth, I mean, there's lots of concerns. At the provincial and local government level, there are extreme pressures on service delivery, and you've highlighted these concerns. So the bottom line is we need to find ways to save money. And is it conceivably within the mandate and the capacity of the FFC to help the legislature to collate and to assess work that's been done, to assess the effectiveness of government spending and areas where we can save? So just to clarify the question, the tendency has been to focus more on the high level, like we must save money, we must save 3%, we must, 3% for the next, or zero growth for the next 3 years was your one proposal, or 2.6 to 2.9% for 5 years. Then we'll kind of steady the ship that's at the moment sinking. But I think the question we're all asking is, okay, where do we do it? How do we do it? How do we find the savings? And so I think as legislatures, we're looking to wherever we can, the GTAC, but is this a space where the FFC can make some contribution in terms of seeing the big picture and saying, well, if we did this, we would be able to save here, what have you. And then there was just lastly one comment that confused me. There was a recommendation where it said, oh, sorry, and in terms of recommendations, like I felt like your recommendations, I didn't have a problem with them necessarily, but I just felt there is actually an opportunity maybe to go deeper here and to guide us further in terms of areas for savings and efficiencies. And then my last one is, there was a phrase on one of the slides where it said the Commission endorses the primary allocations in the Appropriations Bill. And I just wondered if that's a qualified endorsement, because obviously there have been criticisms as well. Maybe you can explain what you do and don't mean by that statement. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Honorable Khanyan.
Chairperson, thank you so much. And greetings to the chairperson and the delegation of the FFC. Chairperson, I want to check from your assessment as the FFC, does this budget help us to deal with the problems that we have as a country, especially the resilient fault lines of unemployment, poverty and inequality. And I want to ask the question in this way. are our municipalities and provinces able to respond through this allocation to the priorities that are being pronounced nationally? Or has this just become a ceremonial process here in Parliament where a budget will be passed and we must now sit with our colleagues and discuss, can we pass it or can we not pass it? And then when we have, this is not the first budget to be passed. You can go through the budget speeches of ministers that have come before. I remember may his soul rest in peace, Minister Pravin, previously when he presented the budget, when he alluded to the difficulties that the South African economy is facing. That very powerful, inspirational speech he made about the resilience of the South African economy and everything. But look, I mean, the fault lines remain persistent. If they are not deepening, they are widening. That is the difficulty that we face. And this is my first term in the National Assembly. We are not meeting for sure with these honorable members for the first time. But have we ever come one day to say, look, a budget is being presented here, allocations are made to provinces in whatever form of classification or whatever way statistical means you can use to explain them. When you have explained everything to us like you have done now and we have left, what then? What does Province A do with this budget? Or Municipal B does with this budget to help us to respond exactly to the realities that the South Africans face. Outside of the formalities that we do here, compliance of having to do public hearings with the FFC, with the Parliamentary Budget Office tomorrow. They may tell us the same things you are telling us today. But the substantive issues are, when all these things are presented, when all work has been done, and maybe on the 2nd of April, Parliament has passed the budget. One honorable member has asked a question here about monies that are being returned to the fiscals year on year. Or maybe even the leakages that we have in the system. The Treasury, we met them last week. There are other things that they explained how they manage their infrastructure projects, how they can follow. All those things that they explained, monies and everything. But at the end of the day, you go to municipalities across the country, there are incomplete projects, there are abandoned projects, there are halted housing projects everywhere, even when we have all these systems in place. So where you stand. And because I want us to move out of the ordinary practices. If there are extraordinary means, I mean, members of Parliament can go out on oversight and everything, but Parliament can't be doing oversight every day to ask questions, to say, but this is what has been allocated. People remain unemployed, money is returned, or money has not been used, money is stolen. But this allocation, how does it help us to respond to the challenges that our people are out of the figures that we talk to here, Western Cape is given such amount, Free State this amount. That is mathematics. People don't eat maths. No. Whatever little amount is allocated to them, they want to see it being put to good use in their area or in their province. And for sure, when you explain that, you will also look at those priorities that have been outlined by the President, the reforms that have been introduced in various sectors, how those reforms are funded, and how that helps us to deal with, if we want to revive economies in particular localities, is this possible? And one other issue that it's very difficult to deal with is the issue of the VAT. The 0.5% increases in VAT, I think it's for the next 3 years. What does that mean to an ordinary person? The minister explained it in the National Assembly when the budget was presented. And he said we're trying to balance the imperatives. What we did is we are expanding the rail network. We are not, we will not be increasing the fuel levy this year, and this and that. But are those initiatives or those interventions realistic? And if that increase is a problem, what else can be done so that we do not put our people on a very difficult trajectory? What are the other interventions we can think of? If that 0.5% increase is a problem, maybe it's not a problem. From your viewpoint, it's okay. But if you see it as a problem, what are the other interventions apart from those that the minister has explained? Do you think we can look into and take those recommendations to the National Assembly? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chairperson, and to the team at the FFC. I must express up front, I personally am deeply, I would say disappointed, because on the first instance, the FFC raises profound questions. Profound. You have challenged today the procedural nature of how we deal with budgets, which is an important issue because it speaks to the legality of the entire process. That is and you have raised, I think, Chen, you opened with the question about which budget passes the standard of adequate or legislated or whatever the actual substantive consultation. Is it one with figures? Is it one without figures? And I listen to that because I think it's an important question. I really, really genuinely do, because it speaks entirely to the whole budget process in, if you like, how the sausage is made. My disappointment herein lies the recommendations do not match the extent of the question, which almost leave you, yeah, I could use other terms, but they'll probably be deemed unparliamentary. So, but genuinely, it's like one of those movies that have a great start and a shocking end. And that's what I feel. When I read this recommendation, I read the first one. The committee endorses the primary allocations of the 2025 Appropriations Bill. You have correctly said that in the consultation, the figures you were given were neither here nor there, or they were not there, and then there was consultation, and then eventually we get tabled things. But the reality of it is that, to me, I find that statement contrary to the sentiment you are presenting. I don't endorse it. And so I'm unclear why the FFC endorses it. And then it speaks about informed by historical expenditure. But that's the reason we are in this mess. It is precisely because we've followed the dictum that says, what is the historical practice? And let's adjust. It's precisely why I asked the question about the outer year. Because if we keep doing what we've always done, endorse what we've always done, why should we get different outcomes? I mean, therein lies my disappointment, because if we are adjusting for inflation or whatever the mechanisms that Treasury use, I must concede, then we are running a 5% deficit annually. I cannot see how you can not anticipate a budget blowout in the outer year. It would be, so I battle with the recommendations. The recommendations proceed. It's recommendation 8. It says, it speaks about appropriations, urges all ministers covered by the bill. And then it says, in the strategic goals outlined in the medium-term development plan. This is a straightforward question. I need to know, have you actually got the medium-term plan? Because I can assure you, Cabinet tabled this thing nearly about a week before this, the next one. And then this document, it's like the missing, it's like the secret memo. It is mentioned, but no one, you speak to DPMRE, say to them, give me your medium-term development plan. Say, no, it's coming. I can't count how many times we have written to either department to request that particular document and the subsequent briefing. It's like you are asking for why we are in the DRC. So the FFC then makes a recommendation on that basis. So I want to know, if you've got it, please help us. And if you don't have it, which one is this one that you are making reference to? I have a problem with some of the projections that have been made, and this wasn't said in this budget. But it speaks, obviously, Treasury and you and PBO have all disagreed on what growth projections are as far as GDP in South Africa. In fact, I will add a fourth layer to it. The South African Reserve Bank makes different projections. So I think that's a question the FFC must engage with, because I think it will help us determine. You know, I know when the Parliamentary Budget Office comes here, I know they are here to advise Parliament. So I don't have to be ambiguous about that point. And you are here to advise this committee. But I need to understand here, which side of the picket line are you on? To use a terrible term like that. Because it's material. If we are here to endorse the views of Treasury, then we must align your presentation with Treasury's opinion. But I think half of what is going on in this country, at least in, it's just because of this very idea that, okay, we do ceremonial consultation. We can tick the box that said we had a, what is it called? A budget forum. These issues were tabled. No real discussion was undertaken. We don't learn anything. We say we cut budgets to municipalities because it works, but municipalities, I'm seeing Salga on Friday. I can tell you as night follows day, they are going to arrive here, tell me, no, we can only raise 60% of our revenue, yet the white paper wants us to raise 90%. The national government has cut for category A municipalities budgets in X, Y, and Z. Therefore, we are here. The capacity at local government is woeful, that even the suggestion that the BFI windows must be open, I think it's 4 times this year, that they are operating that. I can assure you, only provinces or municipalities with a degree of capability are going to maximize that infrastructural thing. The dilemma is this: district municipalities don't always have that capability, and therefore are not going to apply in the BFI window because they don't have project-ready things. So this exercise of saying you are leveling the playing field in a society, in a municipal infrastructure that is incapable, is a fallacious dream. It literally is not going to happen. So your point that you make about allocations done outside the equitable formula, those allocations almost at some point, I will only give them credit on the suggestion that at the end of the day, you find municipalities that are in desperate need can't in fact fulfill their mandate. And yet you've got people in those communities, you've got to do some work. I guess I'm passionate about this because I actually want for the FFC, when I write a report that has to be voted on in Parliament, I cannot use what is recommendations here. I would much rather do what some of the members have raised here to say, you have taken a view that says, this historical practice is going to deliver X, Y, and Z. The budget, if you look at it from the perspective of the citizen, the reality of it is that you have a citizen who's going to pay more on VAT. Inflation. I think our inflation projections are out. I think we're going to see additional inflationary pressures with NESA's allocation to ESCO. A weakened currency in the outer year is going to impact our fuel costs. So I think the projection that says, no, we will cushion people with a 0.5% increase because inflation is low, we'll be mealy-mouthed about it. In a harsh reality, that assumption is not going to hold. So I want to urge the FFC, you at least hear my plea. You are raising dynamite questions and giving us pocket knives to go fight. I would rather you come up with suggestions that say, actually, when I interrogate the budget, the Treasury make recommendations based on Operation Vulindlela and then raised rail issues, etc. Along with the allocations they've gone for is a 1 trillion rand medium-term infrastructure spend, which when you look at the historical patterns of that, that's why it's difficult to endorse, because actually there's been profound underspending even against that allocation. So you then go to the next one. There are issues here that speak to, you've raised NHI in the presentation, but that's not the only massive allocation that was done. The National Empowerment Fund received an additional 20 billion rands, if I'm not mistaken, which is higher than it's ever done. But when you look at its job creation output, over the last 10 years, that's been 100,000 jobs. Now, if you look at the historical spend on the NEF, you can appreciate that I'm not certain that's a thorough investment. But yes, there's a need for this transformation fund, so it's been ring-fenced into that. But I don't attack the NEF for that fund. I ask the question, if a 0.5% increase is only raising 16 billion rands of revenue, and you are allocating 20 billion to the NEF whose performance has been low, surely in answering the Rubik's Cube question, what do you do if you don't increase VAT? That is part of the question. And there are many of these expense items. I only take NEF because I don't want to make an argument about saving billions or cutting millions to save billions or into countering billions. You follow what I mean? You know, people say things like, no, we must cut catering in Parliament so that we don't have to have a VAT increase. I'm like, seriously, you can't cut thousands to try and ameliorate a billion rands issue. It's the same exercise. This is the NEF and its allocation in total. So at the risk of going for too long, I raised that question. I raised the local, the transport allocation in the bid windows. And then I do think, broadly speaking, I'm going to request of the FFC, whether we do it in writing or not, but the legislative processes you have raised here are material and need to be attended to. Otherwise, when we go to court, this issue is going to surface naturally. That we really do more exercise on the medium term, but then also the review that has been put on the table about the review of the the equitable share formula, that work must be in earnest, and Treasury make the point that they've begun the work. I don't know if you've been consulted to give inputs to that, etc., and where we sit, so that we know where this matter is going to end up, at least to some extent. But I must concede, I am not happy with the recommendations that are here. And if they are taken as such, I would be hard-pressed to debate these issues when we put the report together that Parliament must consider these issues. I certainly could not endorse some of the views. Let me park there and get your responses.
No, thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much to the honourable members. Chair, I think some of the issues that, as we're unpacking the substantive issues on our recommendations, they are in the detail. They are in the submission itself. But I think maybe when we now come up with the recommendations, we have not been as coherent as we could have been. So I don't think it's a lost cause or the ship has bolted, because the document is not, the document has been given to you, but the recommendations we can, as we review based on this engagement, without changing the substance of what we have submitted, we can certainly sharpen them. That is not an issue. Chair, a lot of issues have been raised, especially I like the question of Honorable Lekganyane you raised about the budget. What do we think about the budget and the fact that is it speaking to South Africans? I think when the President, remember the budget is informed by the State of the Nation address as well, because the President contextualized our fiscal challenges as a country. And one of the key issues that he emphasizes that over the coming years, government will focus on reducing poverty and the cost of living, drive economic growth that includes everyone, and create jobs. The question is, does this budget speak to that? So if, for instance, government is proposing to increase VAT to 16% in 2 years' time, we do acknowledge that there is a need for additional revenue that is needed. However, we have to ask and examine, how do we get this additional revenue? If we say that we want to go through the route of getting this revenue through the VAT increase, the question is, will it generate the expected revenue? Because we don't know. It's an assumption that is being made that if we increase the VAT revenue, we'll actually have an X amount of revenue. Has that been empirically studied? Do we have evidence of that? The FFC did not do that exercise. We do not know. And also, the important thing, is this the fairest approach to actually getting the revenue? Could there be a better way to get the revenue? So if we have been consulted properly 14 days before, these are the issues we could have discussed to say, is this the fairest way to get the additional revenue? Because these questions also require us to come up with evidence-based research before we can proceed. So in that instance, we don't have those clear answers as the FFC. With regards to the conditional grants, what we have found as the Commission is that these grants have become complex. They've become complicated for the municipalities to even perform on them. So what happens that we have these ring-fence amounts of money that have specific conditions, but the skills to actually spend this ring-fence money are not in the municipalities. So what you find is that these grants are returned back to the fiscus, and who is the loser? Is the average Joe, is the resident of those municipalities, because they are not getting the services that they were supposed to get because the municipality lack the capacity to perform against the conditionalities that come with these grants. So maybe the question that is to say that, can we go back and actually review these grants in terms of what are the conditions? Are these conditions fair? Are these conditions understood? Do the municipalities actually have the capacity to perform against these conditions? And then the other question, why are the provinces ahead of the DORA bill? Because it has been business as usual. It has been expected that you come to Parliament, it was an expectation that it's going to be approved anyway. So let's go ahead anyway. But now the game has changed, the rules have changed. It is not business as usual, but somehow that reality has not sinked in because we're still doing things in terms of the old way of doing things. It's the same process. So that is why we have to say, actually, the DORA bill, which actually inform the provinces of how much they're going to spend, has not yet gone through the parliamentary process, and therefore the legislatures, whatever they are proposing there, it is still not final. But in the past, it has been assumed that it will be final anyway. So let's go ahead. Yeah, I think I will pause from here. The legislative process. Thank you, Chairperson. We will write a letter to actually unpack the legislative process and submit it to the House or to this committee for its consideration. There is a clear process. Why is there a process? Why must we be consulted? Because we have to have checks and balances. We have to, as the FFC, to make informed decisions. We have to interrogate, scrutinize what is being proposed by the executive before it comes to the committee so that we can be able to advise the committee properly. So now if that process, we are being kept out of it, it means that what is being presented, we are only getting the tail end of it as the Commission, because the prior thinking, conceptualization of it, we did not make any inputs in it. Therefore, who is actually losing out? Who's being disadvantaged? Is the South African, the normal person, because now we are unable now to advise Parliament properly. So that is important to say that that process prior must be really authentic, must be transparent, and there must be accountability. Because there's a reason why we have to be consulted, because we provide an independent view on the numbers before they are presented. And if we are not given that opportunity, substantively so, not on the last hour, but 14 days before. Why is it 14 days? Because you give us the documents, the final numbers, and then as the Commission, because we have the expertise and the theoretical analysis and the tools, we will actually interrogate the numbers. So we need 14 days to do that. And then we come with a report. And then we discuss our findings. And then we mutually have a discussion. But if you do not give us that opportunity for us to actually do the interrogation authentically, then it's a problem. Not for us, but it's a problem for South Africans. It's a problem for members of Parliament because they are the representative of the people. Therefore, we are not empowering them properly. I think I'll pause in that instance and give it to you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the questions. And I want to agree and support and I don't know if it makes sense, but let me say, confirm the disappointment. And let me just clarify in terms of that particular recommendation, what it means endorse. You read the whole thing, and in the context, as my chairperson said, has to be read in the whole narrative of the reports that we provide as submission, because what we're saying there is that there are elements in the appropriation bill specifically to those, with regards to the allocations to certain departments, make sense. That there is expenditure over or under, and in so doing, if it's over, then there's a little bit more budget to accommodate, and then if it's under expenditure, then there's some cut. Those instances we may endorse. However, we put it right there in the same sentences that we propose to implement that budget implementation consistently throughout, and that's second part of that. So it's very specific. I want to say that endorsement to, and it has got the considerations are actually much broader, because understand that there are we recognize have to recognize as FFC is that the appropriation bill, there are elements of it that ultimately can't change in a way, right? For instance, debt service cost. Unless we plan to default on these things, then yeah, we can say, you know, throw this bill away. No, we can't. There are elements of it, and this is the little bit of game that is being played. The rules of the game, I should say, not the game itself. The rules of the games is being played here. That is incredibly tricky. Some parts of the appropriation bill can't be delayed. There's no way, unless we want to really disappoint the market, and that is something that we don't want to do. And also, there are parts that are committed in terms of the medium-term expenditure process, framing and process, which is precisely why you're correct, Honorable Chair, that so in order to kind of shift this and turn this ship, one can't do it with just one bill. Right? And therefore, you also can't do it just 1 year. You have to do it in the medium term and consistently through in the implementation of it. And Honorable Ekane said, asked about implementation. That is exactly what are the reforms. The reforms can't just be today we do something and we see results. Budgets, process, in terms of the implementations and all the buildings and sort of those interventions take time to implement. And we have to kind of steer it in a consistent, persistent way to restore this in a credible manner of the fiscal framework. And in line also with that, I just want to, before I hand over also to the rest of the team, but I will address some of it, is that recommendations are not sufficient. I think as the research team, though, and as head of, is that we take that in full. And because we shan't shy away from that, from that conclusion, because, and I think it is, again, I want to request Parliament, this committee, and also my executive authority, that is my chairperson, to consider, is that honorable chair members, funding actually to FFC is still being channeled through National Treasury. That has got, I don't know if you understand, it's an incredibly uncomfortable position actually to already be this, not critical, but just this objective to comment on the budget. And we want to request, I think, use this opportunity to consider potentially requesting the delineation of the FFC's budget from the Treasury's allocations. Understandably so, because how do you oversight somebody that essentially pays your bills? if I may put it so bluntly. What is the MDDP? Yes, it's a compilation of actually all the speeches and the president's actually in his opening of the parliament last year that we infused that into this consideration. But notice that when we're referring to it, we're actually saying that, again, to the how to change the budget, it's in the process, it's the persistent and the consistency of it. We essentially need to look at whether some of this department needs to carry on, really. If it's not aligned to the functions and we don't see any returns on these allocations, then they need to make those adjustments in the budget. But again, let me ask, if, let's just say, for argument's sake, that we want to close a department down, we can't do that right this second. It needs to be done in a medium term. And so in a way, it's kind of, that again, I want to really qualify that point of endorsing it. It's really endorsing it, but we're trying to impress and also guide the points that this needs to be in the view of and or under the conditions of these things in terms of the medium term and in terms of functions and then finance, not just finance first. Because that's what essentially these bills are about. It's finance, it's now money time. Instead of should have gone back to the functions, what exactly do these departments do? Historical projections, yes, we have obviously the medium-term expenditure framework, so a lot of it is really like it comes in waves. So to guide it again, it needs some work of that persistence. I answered some part of it before I hand over. About the debt is essentially what we're trying to bring in terms of the direct charges, is that if we don't control or manage our debt situation and the debt service costs, it has an immediate direct impact on our provincial equitable share allocations. That's basically the simplified terms of it. And it also impacts on other items. For instance, let me quickly jump to the pension point. Why do we talk about it and what kind of implications does it have? It's because that is actually one of the new items that appeared on the direct charges. Why does it have to be there? I mean, in essence, our recommendations on that regard is the point that, look, we all make or we're supposed to have already made all those contributions, employee contributions to the GPF. If there were any changes to whether it be by early retirement or just the normal attrition of and process of these costs of employees, then there should be a drawdown on the GPF. Why should there be a special direct charge on the National Revenue Fund for this purpose? And also in line with that, there's also some questions I want to spend no less than, no more than 5 minutes on this, is that on the VAT, it was quite strange that if you recall, Honourable Chair members, that in the presentation made by the DG of National Treasury, that there was already a provisional allocation, I think about 40 billion, for SRD. So why is then suddenly SRD is turned into this sort of either or? You can only have one of the two with VAT increase. That's another sort of fiscal question that one has to really question about. I think the other points, as Honourable Talega, I think I do want to respond to it because she also asked the same question, the joint one, is that these grants, and especially allocations to local governments, are very convoluted. That whole long list of conditional grants with grant conditions is the reason why, especially for some of the rural and less capacitated municipalities, they can't spend it at the end of the day. They're faced with this framework that is hundreds of pages, and then notwithstanding, they have to implement it, so which means they have to engage procurement processes, which again is a whole long other processes established by National Treasury. The question is, how do you implement that? That's why we see and we call for the recommendations for the conditional grant frameworks and the implementation thereof to be more streamlined. And also, we will raise the question again back to the whole procurement process, because local government has got as even more stringent rules about procurement. I think it's something ridiculous, under 50,000 or something like that. Already you have to engage RFQ, RFP processes. For some good reasons, but again, I think the main critique that we are saying from FFC's perspective is, and from what we have seen and the research we've done, is the fact that you can't assume that all municipalities are the same. These entities and institutions, they have different capabilities, capacities, even the market they face may be different. So you can't just say engage the markets and then send them off on their way. Meanwhile, there's like, in the 100, 1,000, maybe, 100 kilometers, in the vicinity, there's just nobody living there, let alone businesses to submit those bids to engage your procurement processes. Provincial allocations. Notice, another point I would like to point out is that notice that while local governments, there are reductions, right, on the conditional grants, and then also even to some extent the metros. But on the road, on the provincial side, provincial road maintenance grants, there is a huge increase on the provincial road of Gauteng specifically. The reason why I'm bringing that example into focus, however, is the fact that I want to raise is that isn't it a bit too late? We are in 25, 26. I mean, we saw that a couple of days ago, or still, the G20 and the dissatisfaction of President His Excellency regarding the conditions of the roads and so forth. It's late, meaning that in the overall budgeting framework that is being implemented is not responsive. It's not responsive. And not only that, is being mixed up. As my chairperson said in the recommendations for the provincial equitable share, effectively I want to say is that from FFC's perspective, we have actually lost track of what determines those provincial equitable share formula. It's supposed to be on the formula, but because of these phase-ins and because of these outside the provincial allocation formula allocations, and some part of it is mixed from conditional grants. Some part of it is mixed from just because there's no really other reasons, just for specific, projects maybe, being added, subtracted from the provincial equitable share allocation, to the extent that we no longer see this sort of the certainty for provincial equitable share allocations. Also, honorable member, regarding the phasing. The phasing effect works like this. There is a provincial equitable share formula, obviously, that determines the allocations that's supposed to be for the provinces, right? But what happens is that for smoothening, because you don't want to make a too abrupt a change from year to year due to the update of the data, Treasury has implemented this phase-in, effectively saying that instead of supposedly that you were supposed to get 100 Rand more, right, from the calculations, they say, no, we can't give you 100 Rand more because that means 100 Rand less for another province. So we will delay that effect to 3 years' time. So you'll maybe get 33 Rand and then minus 33 Rand in another province. And then, the next year, when a new calculation comes, another 3-year phase in, so maybe that time it would be another 300 Rand, you're supposed to get more, then they say, no, you will only get, get a third of that, so only 100 Rand. So forever you're chasing, ultimately, that provincial equitable share formula determined allocation, never getting there, effectively. That is and that's also from the intergovernmental fiscal relations perspective, is that you are moving further and further away from what is said in the provincial equitable share formula. Just plain and simple. And also a little bit on the local government's equitable share and shifts. I think my colleague Kutso will speak a little bit more on that. But notice, final maybe comment from myself is, notice the language being used for conditional grant for local governments. It seems to say that there's a grant, some support program grant, being merged to this one and merged to that one. I find that rather dishonest. Why? Because these other two grants are actually new grants. What has been done actually is splitting one grant into two grants. And that's complicating the grant framework, right? You're making more as opposed to streamline, slow, and make it simpler, and so that, so that these money can actually be implemented easier. Honorable Chair, if I may, through you, hand over to my other colleagues, see if they would like to comment on the other and answer other questions, Honorable Chair.
Thanks, John. I'll just take the question in terms of honourable member asking about the shifts in terms of around the salaries of the president, deputy president, and members of parliament. I think one can attribute to those changes around just the election cycle and what happened around there. So things around changes in benefits being shifted as new members were introduced, old members left, also around deputy president, there were some changes around there. So I think primarily you can probably point to that as a key reason around that big shift. And also, I think just looking at the base that it comes from as well. So it could be some of the base effects that are...
Sorry, my chief, I'm a little bit puzzled here. What do you mean there were changes in the presidency and deputy president?
When the changes occurred around, I think, one deputy president having retired and then another being introduced. So I think...
You mean in this financial year?
No, that one is not in this financial year. It's pointing to what had already occurred in the 23-24. So this is actual, when you look at our comparisons.
I see.
Yeah, that was a difference there. There was also the question around the EPWP and infrastructure. So I think, Honourable Member, you raised a good point around the audits and looking at these kind of programs and what are the development goals that you want to achieve with it. So I think the question is, has enough been done to realize that in terms of what the actual EPWP was supposed to achieve? So there's definitely a need to look at assessments of not only that program, but programs across government in terms of if they are really achieving the goals they set out. But as we sit now, and I think through our own analysis, as we point to, there are definitely opportunities there around transport and logistics. As we sit, there's been huge underinvestment in the likes of rail. So I think looking at those opportunities and aligning the EPWP with what can be done in terms of aligning some of the opportunities that are currently coming up in the market to bringing the youth into it, looking at training opportunities, employment opportunities around these, the infrastructure development opportunities that are arising currently as the government wants to bringing that big shift into infrastructure. As we bring in the private sector into infrastructure, there's definitely gains to be made around looking at how to align EPWP with those employment opportunities that could arise from that. So yeah, I think that's from me. I'll hand over to my colleagues to the other questions.
Thank you very much. I will respond to a few questions. Jen, can you go to... Yes. Yes, this one. There was a question about this slide, what was happening on those graphs. Yes. What is happening here, what we did is 2 years. We took 20, 25, 26 allocation as per the 2024 Division of Revenue Bill. And then we also took the other year, which was 26, 27, as per the 2024 Division of Revenue Bill and compare those with the 2025 Division of Revenue Bill. So in other words, in 2024 Division of Revenue Bill, this is what was promised to be allocated to provinces. And then now comes 2025. Okay, in 2024 Division of Revenue Bill, this is what was promised to be given to provinces in 2025-26. Now comes 2025-26. In the 2025 Division of Revenue, then what is the difference? Have they been given what was projected to be given, or they were given less? This is what explains that. That is why you see that in some provinces there's been reductions in 2 of those years. For example, there's Northwest, there's reduction in both 2024-5-26 and 2026-27. Then at the end, those are the total, which will combine your provincial equitable share together with the conditional grants, the total of reductions. Thanks. Can you go?
Chair, can we ask a
So just hold, are you
question of
finished? Sir?
clarity?
Yeah, you were saying, Honorable Bateman?
Well, we're having a little conversation here, so I thought let me just bring it into the open. So this is excluding conditional grants, though, would it be? Just your plain divisional revenue excluding divisional grant, conditional, or is it including?
There's this slide is for the PS, and then there's a slide for the conditional grants that will also show what is happening. Yes. And mind, this analysis doesn't consider inflation, because we're just comparing 1 year, which is 2025-26 and 2025-27, which was what was promised in the previous DOR, Division of Revenue Bill. And then I think there's another slide that I should explain. Just go. Yeah, this one with the Education Infrastructure Grant. What is happening there? You see, we've got 2 years, for example, EIG. We've got 25-26, which is the red bars, and 26-27, which is the blue bar. The blue bar, you could see that is only at the Western Cape and the total only. That is for 2026-27. So now concentrating on 25-26, you see that the red bar across provinces. That shows that there's been an upward adjustment for all provinces. But the difference now is that for the Western Cape, because of its particular situation that it found itself in, then you see that both those years, there's been a significant increase or adjustments for both of those years.
Isabella, just explain what situation, sorry Chair to just barge in, just explain the Western Cape 90% increase. What is the context of that, just for clarity, please?
Okay, what happened, remember, in the Western Cape, there were floods that destroyed the schools, and that one is particularly to attend those schools that were destroyed by those floods. And they will continue, the allocation will continue even in the next financial year, that is 26-27.
Chair.
That was done in the BFI window. Let me take Honorable Mkhonto.
I'm triggered. I just want to check if maybe before one joined this committee, if that was considered in as far as what happened to KZN, because we experienced very destructive disasters in KZN. Was this adjustment that is done or effected to the Western Cape, was it ever done before? to KZN. Thank you.
In the, without trying to add more confusion on this issue, in the medium-term budget policy statement, the minister announced the adjustment. Part of that adjustment came out of the Western Cape's qualification in the budget, in the BFI window that was open, because they needed shovel-ready projects, and some of them were the building of schools. Other provinces were not ready and did not apply in that particular process. If that is the infrastructure grant we are making reference to, just now. Honorable Wakeling, we can discuss the Western Cape. Okay.
Chair, can I just have an understanding of the previous slide? Can we just go back to the previous slide? The one that you explained about the comparison that you made. Yes, that one. Is that including conditional grants or not? That's all I need to know.
Oh, okay. That previous slide. No, the slide with the total adjustment and conditional grants is in our submission. It's just, it has that graph. It's a very long graph, which is not here. And then that one speaks to the adjustments for the provincial equitable share. This one, yes.
So just the equitable share?
Yes, for example, there's two bars there. The first, the red bar, is adjustments that has been made for 2025-26 financial year, and then the blue bar is for, okay, sorry, I think it's the other way around. Yes, it's 2025-26 financial year, the blue one, and the red one is one that is projected for 2026-27.
Like it excludes the conditional grants. Yes.
All right, thank you, Sabelo. I'll take, I think, two questions from Honorable Mazibuko. One about how much or what percentage of the budget for municipalities is paid towards salaries and wages. We've done some analysis on that, and on one, maybe needs to understand that the standard norm for the amount or the percentage of the budget that can be directed towards salaries and wages is between 25% to 40% of the total budget or operational budget. Our analysis showed that in the category A municipalities, being metropolitan municipalities and secondary cities, up to I think B3 municipalities, they are at least within that range, the 25% up to 40%, while the B4 municipalities or rural municipalities and also our districts are spending over that budget on salaries and wages, which indeed is very problematic. The second question would be about the reduction of the equitable share to category A municipalities. So I think this one, honorable members, it's quite it's a technical exercise, if I may put it that way. I think members will understand that the equitable share formula is population driven and also depends on the number of indigent households in the municipalities. And indeed, it also takes into account the revenue raising powers of the individual municipalities when allocating money towards these municipalities. But now our understanding is that the National Treasury, when allocating money through the equitable share for this year, made use of the 2023 mid-year population estimates because it seemed that indeed it's cushioning the smaller and more rural municipalities. But we concur with the honourable member that this is worrisome for our larger cities, not only the metros, but if we break that graph down, we'll see that even the B1 municipalities, because those are large cities, they are also affected to a certain extent. But this is a broader topic, one about global urbanization, people moving to larger cities looking for employment opportunities, and it's one topic that is in our or the current submission that is to be tabled in a few months to come, where we investigate, the fiscal pressures that are brought forth by urbanization, and we also touch on issues of, the correlation between employment opportunities within the cities and population growth, because indeed the employment creation would be one of the tools that are used to manage urbanization. So that municipalities can really reap the reward from people that are moving to these cities. Unless if we, when people are moving to the cities and, employment is growing, but still the revenue for municipalities is not growing, it creates problems, because we are seeing now that there are people who are unwilling to pay for services. And municipalities really need to strengthen their revenue collection in that instance. That is it from me, honorable members. I think the chairperson and Chen touched on the issue of conditional grants, and I will leave it there. Thank you.
Honorable Gallagher Mazibuko's got a quick question, and then we need to wrap this up.
Yeah. No, it's actually a comment that in your submission that you are talking about, if you could also include the undocumented migrants, because these big cities, they have a lot of undocumented migrants who are using services, but they are not paying, and they are even not documented, and they are not even part of the budget, because when the population is the measurement, then they are not part of that population because they are undocumented, and there's a lot of them in big cities. So over and above the in-migration, there's also external migration. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable. Yeah, that one becomes a very big problem, because if they are undocumented, then we are unable to capture them in our analysis. But estimation. Okay, all right. No, we will try and do that, Honorable Member. Thank you very much for the suggestion.
Chairperson, I don't know if you've got any comments to make. If I may make an earnest request, just in my observations of today, I hear what you are saying in reflection of the recommendations and the in parts of the document. But I think if we are going to have a mutually beneficial relationship in this regard, it would be helpful for the recommendations to be bolstered up, because I think all of us can concede today that they are insufficient. And therefore, furthermore, also that we've requested a letter that indicates some of the legislative challenges that you face. May I ask that you furnish us with that letter at least by Friday? The reason being that public hearings are on Monday. I would want for Treasury to be able to respond before we start working on the report of the committee by the 8th. This way, some of the questions can be ventilated even more in some of the more supplementary submissions, because I'm always disinclined, particularly for legislators. We must not sit here like we are referees. We are players on behalf of the people. And therefore, we need to be able to speak like people who are capable of doing things, rather than analysts who can read a balance sheet, a budget, all of that, but really a bit like a eunuch in a brothel. We don't want to operate like that, to use such a crude term. So I want us to be deliberate in our engagement. So if I can ask, we do that. In fact, I was saying to my colleague now, I'm going to write to the PBO today just so that we don't get analysis in that sense. Do you follow what I mean? We've really got to be intentional here. We are entrusted with the resources of the people of this country, and we'd serve them poorly if we then come back to them and say, no, we've looked at issues, we've ventilated them, but nothing's going to change. That's not helpful. Thank you so much. Honorable Bateman.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, I don't want to mess with the process here, and I know you're wanting to wrap things up, but I also just wasn't quite sure how to respond to this. I feel like quite a number of my questions haven't actually been answered specifically, and so I don't know whether it'd be possible either to take more time to do that or to ask for a written response from the FFC to those questions. That's the one thing, and then there are other things that, I mean, the constitutional process that we're following here in terms of the budget is quite a major issue, especially because we've already had diverse legal opinions on the presentation of DORA in the absence of an agreed fiscal framework as well as another. So we just seem to be laying on potentially legal challenges here. So I do think it's something we should just take note of. And I think there were also some actions for Treasury to respond to. Let me just let me just leave it at that. So if we could just have the written responses, that would be good. And if we could also just look, if Treasury could also just look through it and see if there were things that needed a Treasury response.
Nokolo and Oli, is there any input you want to make from Treasury that side?
No, Honourable Chair, I think we'll provide written responses.
Okay.
Thanks.
So let me make this suggestion. Honourable Bateman, if you can furnish even the Secretariat with the list of the questions, and then I'll ask the FFC to respond in this regard. The purpose of my procedural and legislative provisions and the letter that I'm asking the FFC is to attend to that very second point that you raise, which is that what does consultation mean? Where is it substantive? Where is it has a deficit? Where are all of these areas? So that it gives Treasury an opportunity to respond properly, and we'll have to deal also with the parliamentary legal services in this regard, just so that we are all on the same page. So that in conjunction with the legal opinion that we've surfaced needs all of the correlation. But I think Treasury must have the right to respond first so that we are kind of all on the same page in that regard. Can that work? Yeah.
Chair, I just want to get your gist. What I get from you is you want to see the legislative changes that we need to bring as a committee, and you're requesting the different submissions that we receive here to speak to that more than the analysis. I'm with you on, and just take me with your journey so that we're on the same page. If that is the case, it's okay with me for now. However, going into the year, financial year, we're still going to need this detail to interrogate, because what we're really saying to each other is this non-performance happening because of the rollovers, and there's a number of issues that we've raised here. Legislatively is one thing, but that will only bring us up to April. Then after that, we need to start working on the nuts and bolts. And that's what I see appropriations meeting is for, to look at the real performance that's happening down on that level. So just take me on this journey so we can just agree on this.
I think don't hear me also saying other processes do not exist. I merely make the point that says you raise important questions in the presentation you make. It deals with some of the issues you raise, what happens in various appropriations. And by the way, the FFC is one component. You've got the PBO, you've got Treasury, you've got multiple, like we saw with GTEC, that compiles the fullness of the report that goes into the depth of the issue. But when you then, having done that work, make recommendations, they can't just say, noted. They have to go further to say, then these are the adjustments that you would seek to make as a committee, because that will guide the work we do in the rest of the year. That's one component on the expenditure framework. But the second component is the point that the FFC started off with, which is then you've got a legislative issue that sits about what does consultation mean, all of that. That also must be ventilated. So this is notwithstanding the first. It's in complement of the other, so that we achieve a much fuller picture. Because it will guide the committee to what Honourable Mkhonto is saying. Honourable Mkhonto mustn't feel like she's a debutant in the committee. She must be able to take a report of the committee to say, well, the committee considered X. It suggested Y, and Z was achieved. You follow? So that at least the work that we do has its own consequence. Otherwise, it can end up being a rubber stamping. And if it's rubber stamping, then take the report and take it as read and then say, we've read the thing, over to you, Treasury, go past the budget, and we'll see you on the other side. Sure. Honorable members, Honorable Bateman, we can have a backwards and forwards. Can we take it outside the meeting, or is it crucial?
I think it's crucial, Chair, if you will indulge me.
Let me indulge you for 1 minute.
We've been speaking about how some of the changes need to take time to take effect. And I think as a committee, we really mustn't lose sight of the need for structural reforms in terms of the process which is followed each year for the public sector wage remuneration. The reason why I say that is we're fighting a losing battle unless we can change the way that process works, because there's always a minimum mandated increase that's across the board, regardless of how people are performing or how they already are remunerated. And so there's always just this upward ratchet. And what that's meaning is we're getting fewer services for money. And that's going to continue unabated unless we can actually look at the process. And that's going to involve making some legal changes. So for me, I think that's one of the systemic risks and systemic causes that we have to address as appropriations. Otherwise, we're always going to be fighting fires without dealing with the real one of the big main drivers of the problems that we face.
No, I mean, I think debt is another, public sector wage bill is another. There are, if you look at the 1 rand analysis, 22 cents is to debt, 30 roundabout is to cost of employees, 60 cents of that is to the social wage and how that's broadly defined along the constitutional frame. So I do think there are tracks within which each of these sit. That the committee has to, I think the agreed upon tabled 4.4%, and I've challenged this issue with the minister last week, as you'll remember, that they adjusted towards 5.7, cannot be something we just sit and say, next time they come back with 10%, what do you say? Because that has an effect of crowding out other expenditure. But I think that's a note for FFC, but when Treasury come here, that's also part of the conversation that you need to have with them also when they come through. So I will have to rule your submission and defer it to when Treasury arrives, if that's okay. Honorable members, in the light of that, I want to take the minutes. I think the meeting is quorate. So if you wouldn't mind, I know, Honorable Bateman, you had a number of, if the FFC can indulge us for 2 minutes, I would appreciate that. You don't need to leave, you can observe. I want to take the minutes of the 14th of March at the Good Home Chamber with the briefing of the Minister of Finance. Those were the minutes about the budget. Page 1 is merely an attendance register. So is page 2. So is page 3. Unless your name is spelled incorrectly, let me know. Let's start with page 4. Are there any members with items that they'd like to amend, include, change? Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Honorable Bateman?
Sorry, are we looking at 14 or 18 March at the moment?
14 March.
14, okay. Not from me on this one.
Okay. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. In the light of that, and then the last page just for signature, may I ask if those are a reflection of the minute of the meeting that was held on the 14th? Is there a member who wants to move for the adoption of the minutes of the 14th of March? Honorable Galega Mazibuko.
I move for the adoption of the minutes as a true reflection, sir, Chair, because I was present as
Is
well.
there a seconder to the meeting? Honorable Mkonto. Move.
I, Nonhlanhla Mkhonto, second the move for the adoption of the minutes of the 14th of March.
Siyabonga kakhulu. The meetings just have been adopted. Let's move to the 18th of March. That meeting was at 9 o'clock. It was a virtual meeting and it was a briefing by the national, on the 2025 national budget by the PBO and the FFC. Page 1 is merely an attendance register. We go to page 2. Page 3 is also an attendance register. Page 4, starting there. Any member wants to make an adjustment? Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Honorable Bateman, yes.
Thank you, Chair. I just would like to request the following changes. There's a bullet point there where it says members questioned its call for a more expansive fiscal policy in the light of the facts that debt service costs were already crowding out other priorities. I'd like to request that we just add the following additional 3 reasons. Debt servicing costs increase with risk. Fiscal multipliers are close to 0, and we're riding very close to a fiscal cliff, which were 3 other reasons that I gave for questioning the more expansive fiscal policy. And then also the last bullet point, if we could amend the first sentence of the final paragraph to include the following, or to read as follows. Members noted that the PBO had not mentioned the following reasons in its analysis of why the top 100 companies are reportedly not reinvesting their profits in South Africa. Tax rates, ease of doing business, government overspending, government debt, educational outcomes, labor laws, BBBEE, corruption, lack of accountability, failing infrastructure, including Eskom ports and freight rail. I note that the failing infrastructure point was mentioned. And then a breakdown of trust and confidence in government. And trust was mentioned, but not the breakdown or the confidence in government. And then further to add, the PBO presentation created for one member the impression, and I'll just add this just as my own personal reflection, not for the minutes, rightly or wrongly, that the PBO was driving an RET political agenda and was a fastidial organ of a previous administration. The chair regarded this criticism as inadmissible because it was dragging the PBO into politics and instructed the PBO not to respond. So, Chair, I realize it is sensitive, but I think it's important that the minutes reflect accurately what took place in the meeting.
Yeah.
These minutes, sorry.
So, and then the last sentence is reads as follows: the PBO it already says this. The PBO indicated that many of the reasons mentioned, and then I would just for clarity would add for low reinvestment of profits, because of the words that I've inserted, were symptoms of high levels that can carry on of economic concentration and inequality, rather than the ultimate reason for it. Many countries with similar challenges did experience high growth. So that I'm just suggesting that last 2 sentences can stay as they are, just with adding those words for low reinvestment of profits.
Yes.
What I can do is I can just do a screenshot and send this to our
I'm trying to
secretary.
get the point that you are making that speaks to the history of the PBO. Is it captured in these minutes?
No, it's omitted.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the light of that, may I ask, can you make? I agree on the amendment that you are making substantively into the minutes. The other point about the PBO, I think certainly you can make the submission, but I know, for example, we can debate the statement of fact because, as I had said even in the meeting, I sat on the board of the PBO. I don't hold a similar view. Therefore, I'm not sure, whilst you made the point in the meeting, I'm not sure it can hold. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, so I hear you, Chair. I
that-
mean, that's why I said in this phrasing, the PBO presentation created for one member the impression that the PBO. In other words, it's just an impression. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'm not going to fight the point. But I did say it, and I do think we should record what I said. And
No, I take the point. So if I can ask you to table that, make the submission, and then may I ask members, given the number of points that you have raised, it was in fact at the meeting, if I recall, it was ruled out, if you will recall, and you are correct, the chairperson, and I made my own observations on the issue. So whether I want to take the more substantive issues and insert them into the minutes, but I can't go into that commentary, if I could put it that way. Because otherwise, if I then have to do it in that manner, there were other comments that were made. Certainly my response was not captured in the issue. Then it becomes a dialogue between you and I in the minutes. And the other members were there. Honorable Kalega Mazibu.
Chair, I think you covered me on your last statement or sentence, that the minutes should reflect what the committee has discussed. Because if the minutes can be detailed in such a manner that it would say, Kalega Mazibuko said this, and this one said this, and the chair ruled out, I don't think those minutes will be really. So I think the minutes is the summary of the view of the committee in this regard. Thank you very much.
As I said, these are not Hansard. So may I make a suggestion, honourable member? If you can make the screenshot, as you've said, of the points you wanted to raise to be included, and those can be added as they speak to the broader summation of the issue, rather than the individual in that sense.
Jay, I'll defer to you on this and to the committee. I don't want to grandstand the issue. I think just to observe, though, that not everything that members observe are views shared by everybody.
Sure.
And otherwise we'd always have to stop and correct everyone and say, oh, no, actually, I don't quite agree with that, or, you know. And so there are going to be a plethora of different views. And I hoped by using the phrase created for one member to identify that it was not the view of every committee member that impression had been created. However, I'm not going to fight over it. It's not that important for me at this point in time. So if we could capture the reasons for the lack of reinvestment, and then I would be happy with that.
Honourable Mkonto.
Chair, I think we have to understand that minutes don't reflect our debates. We will always debate during meetings, but it can't be reflected in the minutes that we debated like this. Minutes will also reflect the conclusion. And conclusion in a meeting is a popular view. So if they say members observed this, it means that was a popular view. It doesn't mean that every one of us was agreeing on that. We have platform in Parliament where we'll go and debate our views. So, Mina, I think the minutes have been correctly captured, because we can't in the minutes have our debates as to who said what and who was not for that view, who was for the view, and so forth. Minutes are not captured like that. Thank you.
I think we can debate this issue, and I've taken members. I think, Honourable Wakelin, I see your hand, but I'm going to ask that actually, what is, in many ways, the point behind the minutes? Well, I left this particular meeting early, and then I could take the same minutes and get a sense as to what the conversation was. Naturally, I'm not looking to find bullet point as to what each individual contribution is. If that's the case, the recordings of the meeting are available for that purpose. I can literally re-watch the entire thing. Because as I said, minutes are not Hansard. So may I ask, with the inputs that you make, the Secretariat is going to make the appropriate adjustments. We will then table these minutes, perhaps maybe tomorrow, at tomorrow's meeting, and then we'll be able to finalize and adopt them, if that is agreeable, because we need to make those adjustments, and I want for members to be able to see them.
Chair, I would just appeal, it's absolutely fine if from my perspective, if you want to take out the two sentences about my personal impressions that have been created. But I do think for the logic and the flow of it, it's important to list all the reasons why I feel there's not reinvestment of corporate profits in South Africa. I mean, I think that's really substantive and important. And it's also relevant in terms of we've framed the PBO's response to that. And I think if we're happy with that, then I'm happy. But I'll send the full thing through to the Secretary. Thank you, Chair. If
you can, I would appreciate that, because I think the 2 points are not the same with respect. So if I can ask that we keep the point that you make about investment is captured in the minutes, and let's amend accordingly and deal with that point. So with that, we will table those tomorrow, and then we will adopt those then. Honorable members, just by way of announcements, we have requested potentially that the session, due to the fact that next week is public hearings. Now, honorable members, may I ask, we can't, I feel like I should say up front, it will be hard to justify any apology in this regard. We had scheduled public hearings a long time ago. Therefore, members must prioritize being there in Limpopo. Otherwise, we might as well, we'll perpetuate the underlying view that it's better to have them here under air conditioning virtually. Trust me, only the people who have access to that will communicate. The rest of South Africa will not. Therefore, let's prioritize being there on Monday in Polokwane. That process has already begun, and you will get details. In assistance to that matter, we are applying for the session on Friday with Salga to be virtual. This way it will free up members as far as travel is concerned, so that we can achieve that. So that's our way of trying to at least make sure that members are accommodated. Honorable Wakeland, you seem to have a...
Chair, sometimes I'm trying to assist you to deal with this matter. So sometimes you must believe that we're trying to assist, not debate further.
No, I believe you.
Okay, so that's just a matter I think we need to deal with. The second point is, on Monday, you're correctly saying that we need to be there. We have not received any flight arrangements yet for Monday. Can we get it as soon as possible that we can make our arrangements? And we assume that Friday will then be virtual, because it affects a lot of other travel arrangements as well that we have to have. Chair, as soon as possible, please, if we can. Thank you.
We shall, and Mashile will make sure that those are finished, Honorable Lekhanyan, yeah?
It's just to check, because we need to be alive to the realities on the ground. And I just wanted to say that what can I say? The people behind who are doing the technical work, organizing the public hearings, if we can just make sure that the stakeholders that we want to meet or the people that we want to meet are aware and proper arrangements are made, the venue as well. I mean, in the last year, we did public hearings on the Bella Bill across the country, and it was two-legged, both at the level of National Assembly and NCOP. And in some areas you arrive there, you'll find people did not know about those activities. This is a very, very important thing. It's happening for the first time in the democratic era that we go to consult people on appropriations. So it must succeed.
Absolutely.
and the attendance must be very good. If there is a way in which we come from political parties here, all of us, we have constituencies. It will not be good for us to go there and ask questions to administrators. Why? Who do we represent if we ask such questions? So even at our level, as honorable members, we must help the work of the committee to succeed. If there are people we know, we must not wait for them to be invited. We must invite them ourselves, apart from the work that the support team will be doing, so that we get a meaningful contribution and input of ordinary South Africans. It will be good for us if we don't ask questions, but we help the process to succeed. Thank you.
No, and I want to endorse that view, Honorable Khanyan, because of it is precisely why we felt we should take it to the ground, because otherwise we will hear. And just for members noting, we are in the process of working an additional session for those who want to do other virtual presentations, etc., because it's difficult on the ground to get a virtual link up also. So potentially we will be organizing a secondary session for members who want to present on that score. Also, it becomes quite tricky for the community members to be listening to a presentation that is not pertaining to their immediate, sometimes, concerns. So we want to allow for that flexibility, so that date will be communicated. But I thought I want to support wholeheartedly what Honorable Khanyan is saying. If you've got community members, people who must come, the farmers in those communities, they must come. This is the people's budget. The people must be represented, and we must hear from them. So may I ask that we to use a political term, we must mobilize. Those are in the program, so you'll get those. In the Mashile?
Chair, I'm not sure if we should schedule the synopsis of a feedback for the public hearings for tomorrow's meeting, or should I take the members through
No, I
what we
think
have in
let's leave
place
it for tomorrow.
For tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Honorable members, it is now 12:45, I think. The meeting is duly adjourned. We will see you tomorrow morning at 9:30.
Same venue, yeah.